The shares he thought he'd earned, the penthouse office he believed he'd paid for, and the Tesla he drove to impress the venture capitalists. There are different kinds of silence: the silence of contentment, the silence of agreement, and the most devastating kind, the silence you keep while dismantling everything you built for someone, piece by piece, because they never knew you were the foundation holding it all up. My name is David. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a small bungalow in East Vancouver, just off Commercial Drive. The fence needs painting. The roof has moss. My neighbors probably think I'm just another pensioner collecting CPP, watching the Canucks disappoint us year after year and complaining about the rain. They'd be mistaken. But this isn't really about me. It's about my son, Michael, and the night he stood on stage at his company's IPO celebration and thanked everyone who'd helped him succeed, except the one person who'd funded the entire operation. Let me start from somewhere closer to the beginning. Michael is my only son. His mother, Patricia, died when Michael was 9. Breast cancer. It was fast, brutal, and it left just the two of us in a city that was already starting to price out people like me. I worked as a machinist at a manufacturing plant in Burnaby. Or that's what Michael thought. What he didn't know was that I'd been investing every spare dollar since I was 25. I bought my first rental property in 1987, a rundown duplex in East Van that everyone said was a terrible idea. I fixed it up myself, rented it out, and bought another one 3 years later. By the time Michael graduated from UBC, I owned 18 properties across the Lower Mainland. Small apartment buildings, duplexes, a few commercial units in New Westminster. I kept everything under numbered companies, used property managers, and never told anyone, not even my son, because I wanted him to understand what it meant to work for something real. I wanted him to see me as a regular father. Someone who showed up to his hockey games in a windbreaker with paint stains. Someone who packed his lunch in reused Safeway bags. Someone who drove a 2003 Toyota Corolla because it was reliable and there was no point wasting money on something flashy. I thought if he grew up without knowing about the money, he'd develop character, resilience, self-reliance. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. Michael graduated from UBC Sauder with a commerce degree. Sharp kid. Always had been. Good with numbers, better with people. He got a job at a tech startup downtown, worked insane hours, and within 4 years, he told me he was leaving to start his own company. Some kind of AI-powered logistics platform. I didn't fully understand it, but he was passionate, and I was proud. He needed capital, he said. He'd been pitching angel investors and VC firms. He'd found some early supporters, people who believed in his vision. What he didn't know was that I was one of those supporters. The primary one, actually. I'd set up an investment company under a different name, Pacific Ventures Limited. And when Michael's pitch deck landed on my desk through a connection I'd cultivated specifically for this purpose, I invested. Not a small amount, either. $1.8 million. That was 35% of his company, though he didn't know I owned it. I told myself I funded it because his business model was sound, because the market research checked out, because it wasn't favoritism, just good investing. That's what I told myself. Anyway, the company, Logi Next, took off faster than anyone expected. Michael landed contracts with major retailers. Best Buy, Canadian Tire, Loblaws. His platform was saving them millions in shipping costs. Revenue grew 300% year over year. He hired 40 people. He moved the office from a shared workspace in Gastown to a proper floor in the Bentall Center downtown. 3,000 square feet with glass walls and a view of the harbor. Michael bought himself a Tesla Model S, midnight blue. He moved into a condo in Yaletown, one of those towers with a gym and a concierge and a rooftop patio. 22nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking False Creek. He started dating Claire, a corporate lawyer whose family owned half of Shaughnessy, it seemed. Her father was a retired judge. Her mother sat on the board of the Vancouver Art Gallery. I watched all of this happen from my little house on Commercial Drive. Michael would visit maybe 4 times a year, usually when he needed advice or when guilt got the better of him. Once he asked to borrow $8,000 for a cash flow gap. I gave it to him without hesitation. He never paid it back. I didn't mind. I thought he was building something real, something that was his. Then came the IPO. Logi Next went public last November. TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol LGX. Opening price $12 a share. By the end of the first day, it hit 19. Michael's stake was suddenly worth $42 million on paper. Mine was worth $28 million, but he didn't know that. Claire's family insisted on hosting the celebration party at their estate in Shaughnessy, one of those properties that looks like it belongs in a British period drama. Stone facade, circular driveway, gardens that probably required 3 full-time staff. I almost didn't go. I knew I'd feel out of place, but he was my son, and I wanted to be there for his success. I showed up in my usual clothes, clean jeans, a flannel shirt from Mark's work warehouse, a jacket I'd bought at a mountain equipment co-op sale 6 years ago. I brought a card with $500 in it, cash. I thought it was generous. The party was massive. Caterers in black and white, carrying trays of champagne and canapes I couldn't pronounce. A string quartet playing in the conservatory. Michael's employees from Logi Next, all wearing expensive, casual, that carefully curated look of tech money. Claire's family and their circle, who spoke with that particular accent wealthy Vancouverites have, where every sentence sounds like they're discussing their ski chalet in Whistler. I stood near the back, holding a ginger ale, trying to blend into the wallpaper. Then Claire's father, Richard, stood up. Tall man, silver hair, the kind of commanding presence that comes from decades of people standing when he enters a room. He tapped his glass with a knife, and the room fell silent. "I'd like to say a few words about Michael," Richard began, smiling at my son. "When Claire first brought him home, I'll be honest, I had my reservations. You know how it is. You want your daughter to choose wisely." Polite laughter rippled through the room. But Michael has exceeded every expectation. He's built a company worth over $100 million. He's created jobs, innovated an entire industry, and he's done it with integrity and intelligence. He's exactly the kind of man we hoped Claire would find. People applauded. Michael beamed. Claire kissed his cheek. Then Richard continued, and he did it the right way. He didn't inherit wealth or take handouts. He earned every dollar through hard work and vision. That's the kind of success that matters. The words hit me like a slap. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to correct his future father-in-law, to acknowledge that he'd had help, that someone had believed in him enough to risk nearly $2 million. Instead, Michael stood up, raising his glass. "Thank you, Richard. I just want to say, I'm grateful to everyone here who supported me along the way. My incredible team at Logi Next." He gestured to his employees, who cheered. The investors who took a chance on us when we were just a pitch deck and a prayer. He nodded to a group of men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. And of course Claire, for believing in me, even when things were uncertain. He paused, scanning the room. His eyes landed on me for half a second, then moved on. "I also want to acknowledge that I didn't come from money. My dad worked an honest job in a factory, blue collar, practical. He taught me the value of hard work, and I'll always appreciate that. But this," he gestured around the opulent room, "this is a different world. This is what happens when you combine education, opportunity, and relentless drive. And I'm proud to say I built this myself." The room erupted in applause. I stood there, ginger ale in hand, feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. He'd thanked everyone, his team, his investors, his girlfriend. He'd acknowledged me only as the blue-collar dad who taught him to work hard, completely unaware that I was the investor who'd made it all possible. Claire's mother leaned over to someone next to her, and I heard her whisper, "Such a self-made man. Not like these trust fund kids." I set my drink down on a side table, walked out through the front door, got into my Corolla, and drove home. And that night, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of red rose tea, I made a decision. I'd spent 35 years building something for Michael, and he had no idea. He thought he'd done it all on his own. He'd stood in front of 100 people and claimed he was self-made, erasing me from the story entirely. And maybe that was partly my fault for staying invisible. But the erasure, the public dismissal, that wasn't something I could ignore. So I started making calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Gordon. I'd worked with him for 20 years. He handled all my corporate structures, all my property acquisitions, everything I wanted kept private. Gordon, I said, I need you to pull together all the documentation on Pacific Ventures' investment in LogiNext. Every share certificate, every contract, every clause. There was a pause. David, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time my son learned where his foundation came from. Are you planning to sell your shares? Among other things. Another pause. This is personal, isn't it? Very. The second call was to my accountant, Sandra. She managed Pacific Ventures and my property holdings. She didn't know Michael was my son. I'd kept that information compartmentalized. Sandra, I said, I want to dump all our shares in LogiNext. All of them, as soon as the post-IPO lockup period ends. David, that's 35% of the company. If you sell that much that fast, you'll tank the stock price. It'll look like insider selling. The company's valuation could drop by half. I understand the consequences. This will destroy shareholder confidence. The company might never recover. I'm aware. She hesitated. May I ask why? Let's call it a lesson in gratitude. The third call was to Westwood Property Management, the company that handled my commercial building in the Bentall Center, the one where LogiNext had their office, the beautiful space with harbor views that Michael thought he'd negotiated such a good deal on. Hi, this is David Chen. I own the building at 555 Burrard Street. I need to issue a notice of lease termination for the 12th floor. Mr. Chen, that's LogiNext space. They've been model tenants. Is there a violation? No violation. The lease has a clause allowing landlord termination with 90 days notice for renovation purposes. I'm exercising that clause. Understood. We'll send the notice tomorrow. The fourth call was to TD Auto Finance. Michael had leased his Tesla 2 years ago. What he didn't know was that I'd co-signed the lease because, at the time, his credit wasn't quite good enough for a $90,000 vehicle on a startup salary. I'd done it quietly, through Pacific Ventures, so he'd never know. I need to remove Pacific Ventures as co-signer on lease agreement LT 9847 and transfer full financial responsibility to Michael Chen. The representative clicked through some screens. Mr. Chen, if we remove the co-signer, Michael Chen will need to re-qualify based on current income and credit. Looking at his file, without the co-signer backing, he won't meet our requirements. We'd need to repossess the vehicle. I understand. Please proceed. The fifth call was to the property management company that handled my building in Yaletown, the tower where Michael's condo was located, the one he thought he'd worked so hard to afford. This is David Chen, owner of the building at 1050 Pacific Boulevard. I need to issue a notice of lease termination for Unit 2204. That's Mr. Michael Chen's unit. Is there no violations? Owner occupancy clause. 90 days. I'll prepare the notice. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my hands. They were the hands of a machinist, even though I hadn't worked in a factory in 15 years. Calloused, scarred from old cuts, permanently stained with metal dust that never fully washes out. I wondered what Michael saw when he looked at these hands. Probably just the hands of a simple factory worker who didn't understand his sophisticated world. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt powerful. Part of me wondered if I was being cruel. But then I remembered his voice at that party. I built this myself. I'd built it, every foundation stone. And he didn't even know. The emails went out the next week. Short, professional, devastatingly precise. To LogiNext's CFO, whom I'd never met in person. This is Pacific Ventures Limited. As per Section 4.2 of our shareholder agreement, we are providing notice of our intention to liquidate our entire position in LogiNext, 35% common shares, upon expiration of the lockup period in 30 days. Please confirm receipt. To Westwood Property Management. Please proceed with 90-day lease termination notice for LogiNext's office space, 12th floor, 555 Burrard Street. Reason: major renovations. Effective January 15th. To TD Auto Finance. Please remove Pacific Ventures as co-signer on lease LT 9847. Transfer complete liability to primary lessee. To Yaletown Property Management. Issue 90-day termination notice to Unit 2204. Owner occupancy. Effective January 15th. I didn't copy Michael on any of them. I wanted him to discover it the way most people discover their world is collapsing. Gradually, then all at once. The first crack appeared 5 days later. Michael called, voice tight with confusion. Dad, something weird happened. TD called about my Tesla lease. They said there's an issue with the cosigner. I didn't even know there was a cosigner. I was in my workshop, refinishing an old chair I'd found on the curb. I put down my sandpaper. That's because I co-signed it 2 years ago, Michael. Your credit score wasn't high enough for the lease amount. Silence. You... what? Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. You assumed you'd qualified on your own. Well, they're saying they need to reevaluate my application, and without the cosigner, they might take the car. That doesn't make sense. I've been paying on time for 2 years. Have you been paying? Or has the lease been structured in a way that didn't strain your actual budget because there was a cosigner backing it? More silence. Dad, can you call them and sort this out? This is obviously some kind of administrative error. It's not an error. I've asked to be removed as cosigner. You're on your own now. Why would you do that? Because it's time you understood what you actually built yourself and what was built for you. He hung up. The second crack appeared 10 days later. The CFO of Loginex called me directly. Michael must have given him my number as a last resort. Mr. Chen, this is Douglas from Loginex. We received your notice of intent to sell your shares. I'm hoping there's been a misunderstanding. I was having breakfast, toast with peanut butter, coffee from a can of Nabob. No misunderstanding, Douglas. I'm liquidating my position. But that's 35% of the company. If you dump that much stock right after our IPO, it'll crater our share price. Investor confidence will evaporate. We could lose half our market cap. I'm aware of the likely outcomes. Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this will devastate Michael. He's worked incredibly hard to build this company. Has he? Or did he work hard to execute a plan that was only possible because someone risked $1.8 million when he was nobody? Douglas hesitated. I don't understand. Are you connected to Michael personally? I'm his father. Long silence. His father? Michael never mentioned. He said his father was a factory worker. I was. I also happen to own 18 properties and run an investment company. I'm Pacific Ventures, Douglas. I've been his primary investor from day one. He just never knew it. Oh my God. Indeed. You have 20 days before I execute the sale. I suggest you prepare your shareholders. The third crack appeared 2 weeks later. The eviction notice. Michael showed up at my house, holding 2 letters in his hand. His face was pale, eyes red. Dad, what the hell is happening? I was in my garden, pulling weeds from the vegetable patch. I didn't stand up. You'll need to be more specific. This! He waved the letters. My office lease is being terminated. My apartment lease is being terminated. Both by the building owners. Both citing renovation clauses. Within 2 weeks of each other. That can't be coincidence. I pulled another weed, tossed it in the bucket. It's not a coincidence. What do you mean? I finally stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees. I own both buildings, Michael. I've owned the Bentall property since 2015. I bought the Yaletown Tower in 2019. You've been renting from me this entire time. He stared at me like I'd started speaking Mandarin. That's impossible. I signed those leases through property management companies. I never saw your name. That's the point of numbered corporations and property managers, son. Anonymity. The letters fell from his hands. Why are you doing this? Is this because I didn't thank you properly at the party? Because I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. But this is insane. It's not just about the party. It's about you standing in front of 100 people and declaring you're self-made. It's about you erasing me from your success story. It's about you looking at my hands, my clothes, my life, and seeing nothing worth acknowledging. I acknowledged you. I said you taught me the value of hard work. You acknowledged me as the blue-collar father who taught you to show up on time. You had no idea I was the investor who made your entire company possible. You had no idea I owned the buildings you worked and lived in. You thought you'd earned it all yourself. Michael sat down on my porch steps, head in his hands. This is crazy. You're destroying my life over a speech? I'm not destroying your life. I'm removing the supports I put in place without you knowing. Everything that collapses was only standing because of me. If it was really yours, it would still be standing. The shares. Douglas said, someone named Pacific Ventures is dumping 35% of our stock. That's going to kill us. The price is already down 20%, just from the rumor. I sat down next to him. Pacific Ventures is me, Michael. I'm your primary investor. I put in $1.8 million when you had nothing but a PowerPoint. I own 35% of your company. And yes, I'm selling it all. He turned to look at me, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes for the first time since he was a child. You're going to destroy my company because I didn't thank you in a speech? I'm going to let your company stand on its own merit without my support. If it's as strong as you claimed, it'll survive. If it was only strong because I was holding it up, then it deserves to fall. Over the next 3 weeks, everything unraveled. The Tesla was repossessed. Michael came out of a meeting one afternoon to find it gone, a notice on the windshield explaining he didn't qualify for the lease without a cosigner. Logitech's stock went into freefall. When Pacific Ventures' sale executed, the share price dropped from $19 to $7 in a single day. Institutional investors panicked. The business press ran stories about insider dumping and loss of confidence. Michael's paper wealth evaporated. His employees' stock options became nearly worthless. The office eviction went through. Logitech had to scramble to find new space, ending up in a much smaller office in Burnaby with no harbor view and half the square footage. The condo eviction was finalized. Michael moved in with Claire temporarily, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that her parents weren't thrilled about it. Richard's comments about Michael being self-made must have felt pretty hollow once the truth came out. And then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Patricia's sister, my former sister-in-law, Janet. David, what in God's name have you done? I was watching the Canucks lose to Calgary. I muted the TV. Hello, Janet. Michael just told me you've destroyed his company, evicted him, taken his car. He's falling apart. What kind of father does this? The kind who's tired of being invisible. This is about your ego, about some party where you felt snubbed. It's about teaching him the difference between what he built and what was built for him. A lesson he should have learned before he started taking credit for other people's work. You're punishing him for being proud of his accomplishments. I'm teaching him that they weren't entirely his accomplishments, and that the foundation he was standing on was me. Janet's voice shook. Patricia would be ashamed of you. That one hurt. Maybe. But Patricia also would have wanted Michael to understand humility, gratitude, and the truth about where he came from. I failed to teach him those things by being too quiet. I'm correcting that now. She hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd gone too far. Michael hadn't called me in 2 weeks. Claire had apparently started having doubts about the relationship once the money evaporated. The company was hemorrhaging employees. I'd won, but I wasn't sure what exactly I'd won. But then I thought about the party again. Thought about Michael's voice saying, I built this myself. Thought about Richard saying, he didn't take handouts. Thought about all the years I'd quietly built things for my son. All the money I'd invested. All the support I'd given. And how he'd summarized my contribution as teaching him to work hard. Maybe I'd made a mistake being so invisible. Maybe I should have told him the truth from the beginning. But the lesson was still valid. 4 weeks after the eviction notices, Michael showed up at my house. He looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, exhausted. Can I come in? I stepped aside. We sat in my small living room. The same room where he used to do homework at the coffee table. Back when he was in elementary school and life was simpler. I need to understand, Michael said quietly. The condo, the office, the company, the car. That was all you? Yes. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to feel like you'd earned it. I wanted you to have pride in what you'd built. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pride? I don't have anything left to be proud of. The stock is down 70%. Half my employees have left. Claire and I are done. I'm living in a basement suite in Surrey. You still have your skills, Michael. Your intelligence, your work ethic. Those are real. The company might be struggling, but you still created something from an idea. You still developed relationships. You still built a product that works. That wasn't fake. That was you. But it wasn't just me, was it? It was your money, your buildings, your support. Support isn't the same as doing the work. I gave you capital and resources. You built the actual business. The problem is, you forgot the capital, and resources didn't appear out of thin air. You forgot someone took a massive risk on you. Michael looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. I'm sorry. For the party. For what I said. For not seeing you. For all of it. I know. Can you forgive me? I thought about that question for a long time. Yes, but forgiveness doesn't mean rewinding the clock. You need to rebuild now. On your own terms. Not mine, not Claire's family's. Yours. I don't know how. You'll figure it out. You're smarter than you think. You've just been coasting on invisible support for so long that you forgot you could stand on your own. He nodded slowly. What happens now? Now, you start over. You find investors who you actually know are your investors. You build a company without hidden safety nets. You prove to yourself what you can really do. And if I fail, then you'll have learned what success really costs. And that's worth more than any IPO. He stood to leave. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned back. Dad? Yes? That thing you said at the party about me thanking everyone who helped me. You were right. I should have thanked you. Not just for teaching me to work hard. For everything. Even if I didn't know about it. I smiled just a little. Thank you for saying that. And Dad? That jacket you wore. The mech one. I used to be embarrassed by it. But now I understand. It's not about the jacket. It's about the person wearing it. And I should have defended that person. I appreciate that, son. He left. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite peace, but something close to it. 8 months have passed since then. Michael found new investors, smaller ones, people who believed in the core technology even after the stock collapse. He restructured Loginext, cut it down to 15 people, focused on profitability instead of growth. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. And it's actually his this time. He calls me every Sunday now. We meet for breakfast sometimes at a diner in New Westminster, halfway between our places. Nothing fancy, just coffee and eggs and real conversation. Last month, he asked if I'd consider investing in his next venture once Loginext stabilizes. If you invest, he said, I want it transparent. I want to know exactly what you're contributing. I want your name on the cap table. And I want to make sure I'm actually earning my equity, not just spending your money. Deal, I said. I don't know if I did the right thing. I still think about it late at night. I took away my son's company, his home, his car, his relationship. That sounds monstrous when you say it plainly. But it wasn't really his company, or his home, or his car. They were all mine, lent to him, and he never knew it. And in the end, maybe that's what silence is for. Not to avoid confrontation, but to prepare for the moment when you speak, and your words rebuild everything from the foundation up. I'm 63 years old. I live in a small house in East Vancouver. My fence still needs painting. My roof still has moss. My neighbors still think I'm just another pensioner watching hockey and complaining about the rain. They're wrong, but I don't need them to know that anymore. I only needed one person to know. And now he does. The silence isn't empty now. It's full of understanding, and that, I've learned, is worth more than all the properties I've ever bought.